Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of TechFire. Thank you all for joining us this morning. My name is Niall Kitson, and I'm the editor of TechCentral.ie, and I'm going to be your host for this morning's session. Now, for those of you who haven't attended TechFire before, I just wanted to introduce you to this morning's format. We have two speakers with us today. We have Ian Keane, who is the head of solution engineering for the UK and Ireland at Oracle. And we also have Simon Cullen, who is the director of Vidatum. If you have any questions based on any of the presentations this morning, please do put them in the IM function. They will be moderated, of course, and they will be dealt with by our panel towards the end of the session. So please do feel free to add your voice, add your comments, and hopefully we'll have a chance to fit them all in towards the end. This session is being recorded and will be made available for replay at techcentral.ie or techfire.techcentral.ie. And in a departure from our normal format, where we usually give an overview of the market according to various analysts, we have actually conducted our own research in association with Oracle under our TechBeat brand. And what we basically looked at was the migration of back office services to the cloud and whether or not there was an appetite to do so, and what sort of applications were being moved and which ones were still being held back, and for whatever reasons. Now, it's been said that the last 2 years of digital transformation has taken place within the last 6 months, and that's been a headache for companies all over industry who are either beginning their journey or who have had their journey affected, either in terms of velocity or lack thereof. So we're now in a space where it's not just whether something is going to be migrated to the cloud, but how quickly can it be moved? And that presents a number of challenges and concerns, both for vendors and for partners, and of course for customers as well. So to dip into the findings of our survey, I'm just going to share my screen with you for a little bit and show you some of the initial findings. And I'm also then going to ask you guys for some of your reactions to what we're going to show you, just to establish a baseline of where we all are this morning. So one moment while I go into share screen. So the first finding that I would like to draw your attention to is the very simple question of whether organizations currently use any of the sort of cloud service variations or cloud computing variations that are out there. So we took a very basic barometer, and of course, some of these figures will add up to 100% all the time. Some of them won't, because there have been separate options for specific answers. So for this one anyway, we still see that the majority of people out there are using public cloud at 35%, with roughly 20% using some kind of private cloud. Now, what's interesting there, of course, is the use of hybrid and multi-cloud, the former of which is roughly at a fifth of our respondents. It was roughly 100 IT professionals out there. So we had a very targeted response. It wasn't just 100 people off the street. This was 100 IT professionals. And roughly just above 10% there, we had multi-cloud. So it's still, public cloud is still on top, but I think it's fair to say there's a very much a growing appetite to try new things, either in multi or hybrid. So moving on to our second slide here, again, just setting the scene. We're wondering what percentage of organizations' workloads are currently being cloud deployed. And as we see there, we're almost, well, we are at a majority stage at this point, where we're seeing the sort of the 50% plus, if you will, is eventually getting there. There are an awful lot of organizations who seem to have stalled slightly, roughly a quarter and below. currently deployed. So again, the message has gotten through that cloud services are there, people are using them, and it's very much just the extent to which they are being used is the focus of our debate. Again, we're looking at the velocity here of people's digital transformation efforts. And it looks like the majority of companies do expect to see that momentum, to see that velocity of change increase over the current year to roughly 25%. And we look forward to gaining your own thoughts on this as the session progresses. Again, what's interesting here is that roughly 20% of respondents said they don't see any change forthcoming in the future, whether that's down to economic considerations or business retrenchment, or whether people have been let go or being taken on. This is a point that is worth reviewing, hopefully in the Q&A section later on. So now it's time to move on to our first speaker of the morning, Ian Keane, who is the Head of Solution Engineering for Oracle, UK and Ireland. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen here. So unfortunately, you won't be able to see any of me for the next few minutes, which is pretty good. So I'm going to mute my microphone. Just going to leave you in Ian's company now for the next 15 minutes or so.
Just before you go, Niall, good morning. Can you see my screen? Is it sharing?
I can indeed, yes.
Ah, perfect. Okay. Thank you. Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome, and thank you for your time today. We're going to talk about moving critical workloads to the cloud, and it's my job to help customers to realize the full potential across their entire business of cloud. My name is Ian Keane. I'm the Head of Solution Engineering for UK and Ireland at Oracle Digital, and I lead a team of deep experts that take on the challenge of how our customers can take full advantage of cloud today. Skipping on from our safe harbor statement. Often we hear from customers when they're already using cloud. They're out there cracking away, rolling out new capabilities and yielding value from that cloud. But there's a rub. That's greenfield. That's the place where rolling out new applications with no baggage to bring forward and no history, no heritage of the organization from which they come from. More recently, Oracle did a survey with computing, and it was found 87% of respondents said they're going to use more cloud over the next 3 years. And that's really unsurprising. But what is surprising is that just 57% are reaping the cost benefits they expected. So you've got to ask why. Why are they having the challenge of hitting those marks and getting value from cloud if so many people are using cloud already today? And I posit this, that's the greenfield we're looking at, which is cloud native for sure, but there's a great deal more to it than simply that. So let's ask ourselves a question. What about the brownfield spaces? You know, the places where we already invested strongly into our organizations and that we have the opportunity to move to cloud. And that makes us think, hang on, what I really need is a different type of cloud, one that can give me greenfield and one that can meet the challenges of brownfield, delivering a subtly different approach to modernizing a landscape, as we see on the left, into the modern landscape of the right, but allowing me to address the true needs of my enterprise. And it's not just us that think this, it's a whole range of different analysts out there looking forward and predicting that there's a massive market for a slightly different approach using multi-cloud. Now, there are many definitions of multi-cloud, combining clouds together in order to connect them to yield a particular service. Or alternatively this, how about picking the right cloud for the right workload, not simply putting something into a space where previously I used for my greenfield space, but thinking, hang on, where would this run best? As we can see from the slide on the top left-hand side, Gartner are predicting 75% of mid-size and large organizations will have adopted a multi-cloud or hybrid IT strategy by 2021. And on the bottom left, we see McKinsey are predicting multi-cloud set to be a $1.2 trillion market opportunity by 2022. So if this growth or values is to happen as predicted by the analysts, then it's fair to say the value we bring back from cloud is largely based on the workloads we bring to it and the effectiveness of those workloads which are allowed to flourish, whether it's greenfield or indeed brownfield. Now, particularly when we think about multi-cloud, it's a decision for an awful lot of enterprises today, as part of that respondent said in the computing survey. 67% said they'll be investing in multi-cloud over the next 3 years, and that trend is definitely towards multi-cloud, because there's a growing recognition that as we move on and find new opportunities, we need to pick the right cloud, and sometimes the one I pick to start with isn't necessarily the right one. In the computing survey, we find 4 key areas as what it is that enterprises are trying to achieve in their investment. Greater agility. Part of that doesn't apply to developing new applications, but being able to modernize existing heritage applications, the ones we thought as legacy. And let me throw this at you. Legacy in software systems is often viewed as a bad thing, almost like a weight we have to carry with us. But yet, when we talk about our sporting heroes like Pele or Muhammad Ali, it's considered a good thing. We in Oracle see heritage or legacy workloads as being really important, as is the workload that runs your business. Next, we have leveraging different vendor strengths, picking the key differentiators that one vendor can provide you or make the difference to your experience or the ability to gain value. Next, we have risk balance. From a security and isolation perspective, choosing multi-cloud can help enterprise customers with their risk treatment plan. A lot of these core critical applications rely on privacy and a separation, and frankly, just the ability to make sure no one else can get access. Customers need security and risk mitigation built into the very fabric of their chosen cloud platform. And finally, avoiding vendor lock-in. Customers want to be able to take the open approach and the ability to hybridize. They want to be able to deploy their applications, whether they need to have the choice of the optimal place where to deploy them. So as a consequence, we're going to take those requirements, and that's something that Oracle did at least 4 years ago, to take the first generation of cloud, what I call the green happy place, where you have elastic resources, you can pay for what you use, you can use self-service and so on. But we need an additional layer. Why? Because the ideal cloud is not one that simply runs my greenfield platform, but one that enables me to run both my greenfield and my brownfield workloads in a cost-effective, secure, and risk-averse way. And Oracle Cloud, by bringing in a second generation of that capability, has focused on superior performance, enterprise-grade qualities built into that cloud. In fact, I think it's worth mentioning that Oracle is currently the only cloud provider that will give customers an SLA on performance. Security first, and an open ecosystem as much as any other cloud. It's also taken the first generation cloud and made it more fitting for that brownfield environment, as well as delivering on the greenfield capabilities as well. So let's move beyond that, and let's talk about some of the benefits. The customers that have taken value from this approach. When we look at the left-hand side of my slide, we see 6 core examples of just how customers are coming and using a second generation cloud, taking intrinsic value, not only from the greenfield side, but from the brownfield side, but critically being able to use both together in one place. If we consider SNCF, which is the French National Railway, they set out with a strategic set of cloud vendors and asked them, how do I move this mission critical workload over to the cloud? Each and every one of them from the first generation cloud took one very large step backwards. Why? Because they weren't sure that they could support the levels of requirements that the enterprise needed for that critical application, which was their ERP, by the way. Fortunately, we were able to work with them through a combination of our partners, Capgemini and SNCF themselves, and we were able to bring that workload to the cloud by delivering on their enterprise requirements. A similar idea from a slightly different perspective, another large-scale organization, Arvia, where SaaS capabilities were combined to extend in order to allow that organization to reach the pinnacle of HR interaction, to make it easier, simpler, and massively effective to allow Arvia to hire the right people and retain them. And we moved to Vodafone, who are in the place where their focus is to release a software that allows you to choose and interact with a cell phone plan and interact with the company at an enterprise level. Vodafone is running an Oracle Cloud today, and part of that reason is the ability to combine new with the old and get a blend of that ideal to meet enterprise requirements. However, it's not all about massive customers. It's also like of Mestech, who are a smaller independent software vendor focused on manufacturing. They're able to take the power of Oracle Cloud and combine them with other clouds to meet the needs of a multi-cloud environment, delivering a solution out of what is essentially a patchwork data center, taking that out and being able to put into a cloud environment that matches what they had in their data center and effectively move from on-premise software to a combination of cloud capabilities. But it's not enough simply to do that. The impact on all of these, particularly when we think about Mestech, is not simply they were able to move technology, but the fact they were able to move technology meant they were able to change their commercial model to their customers to fundamentally change the game where they became a software as a service provider rather than a software company that requires customers to invest upfront. That had a profound effect on the way which Mestech were able to go to market. Now, having spoken about these and been through the process, it's not just the ability to bring the beating heart of an organization out into the cloud, as I've mentioned, it's the ability to combine both the beating heart and the modern differentiated workloads as well. Now, it's fair to say we're confronted with a global challenge with COVID-19, and I'm sure you're all aware of the technologies of video conferencing, and Zoom is a fantastic example of an organization which we're using today. And Zoom were faced by a challenge with the world almost grabbing hold of it and wanting more. They experienced that explosive growth that only companies can dream of. And then they were faced with that problem called the nice problem to have. And they came to Oracle and asked help in solving their nice problem. So in the case of Zoom, as you well know, it's about connecting millions across the world, and they're doing that now in Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. And that was brought in and brought on in an incredible short amount of time. The starting conversation with the customer was, look, our situation really needs to change, which quickly became, wow, we're already live and we're already running. It really doesn't stop there. The resulting platform from all these discoveries which we've had with our customers who have taken this technology and frankly made it real, brought together for their business, made the difference to their bottom line and the value they take from cloud. It doesn't just stop in a few areas we discussed. Spread across 30 regions, we have a core set of infrastructure services that we touched on, focusing in on data services, developer services, and next layer of services, where we start to combine those technologies and then adding in the partner ecosystem as well. Now, it's not just us. More recently, we have discovered, and so have Gartner, they said, what's stopping you from moving critical business functions? And in many cases, it comes down to picking simply the right cloud for that workload that will deliver the best value to you. And Gartner says it's time to start including Oracle as a viable option when you're evaluating your public cloud providers. And I think a lot of that is based around the capability we've just seen and just been through from the greenfield to the brownfield, to brand new technologies, to cloud native. Across the board, this is a cloud that's designed for your enterprise, and we generally recommend that you go down that route and take a closer look at us. So to that end, if you're not using Oracle Cloud today, why not take a free trial and see for yourself? Because when you discover what's truly there and what you can do with Oracle Cloud, and more importantly, what value your organization can extract from Oracle Cloud, I believe you're impressed. We have two types of trials. One is always free. That's free forever. And then we can extend that and we can give you a 30-day free trial for other services. So just to show you what's free, we offer two autonomous databases. So you could have one as an autonomous database warehouse and one for transaction processing. So compute, storage, load balancing, and notifications. That's free forever. And then you can extend out if you want with a 30-day free trial. Both of these trials can be done at oracle.com/cloud/free. And that's it for me. But before we go, that's my contact details. If you'd like to connect and learn more, I'd be happy to talk to you. And I'd like to thank you for your time today. And I'd like to hand back to Niall, please.
Thank you, Ian, for that very detailed presentation. There's an awful lot to chew over there. One thing that I think it would be a nice thing to do at this stage is to open our first poll to the to our audience today, to our attendees. And one of the points that is raised very often is that of vendor lock-in and how this affects sort of your ability to shop around, if you will, and maybe to consider trying different solutions from different providers. So I'm launching a poll here asking the very simple question, is vendor lock-in still a concern when selecting a cloud provider? So you should see that launching on your screen now. And we'll leave that up for a few seconds, and straight away we're seeing an awful lot of traffic here, and it looks like that concern about lock-in is still very much there. We'll give it another 10 seconds. I think we've got a fairly comprehensive view of the opinion there. So thank you all so much for participating in that. So, you know, out of all our attendees, more than 3/4 are concerned about vendor lock-in. So that's again, that's something that we should be able to look at towards the back end of our presentation today. So our next person that we will be meeting is Simon Cullen, who is the director at Vidatum. Now, Vidatum is a company that I'm very excited to talk to them about their offering, and let's just jump into Simon's discussion now. Simon is an Oracle customer, and I'm sure he will have an awful lot to say about his own customer journey. So, Simon, how are you this morning?
Very well, thanks, Niall.
So I guess first off, let's have a chat about Vidatum. What do you do?
Okay, well, we are a company that provide an application to the research department of universities. We initially started as a company that provided general Oracle services. That would have been, a number of our backgrounds would be, from the Oracle side. And we started then working with universities about 7 or 8 years ago in terms of developing some applications for them, such as enrollment and registration solutions, curriculum solutions, things like that. And then we ended up doing some work around research management solutions. And so what we ended up focusing on, and what we do exclusively now, is we have a product set which supports the research department of higher education institutions. So within that, you'd have things like a current research information system, a grant management system, ethics submission system, and then we capture project timesheets. So the idea of all these sort of modules is to pull together the main function, to support the processes of the main function of the research department within the university and higher education sites.
That's a very broad range of features that you've built in there. And starting off with grant management and things that are very much in front of the researcher. So in terms of product development, how did you decide to expand your reach just away from grant management all the way out to the back office?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it was initially in partnership with a university, but then when we tried to take that as away from a project and move it to commercialization, you could see that people, while they were very interested in that element, they really wanted all of their processes supported in sort of one go-to system, if you like. So, I mean, a number of our competitors would focus very much, on the research side. And then we'd have other competitors which would focus very much on the grant management side. But our offering is really about trying to support all of the processes within the research department. And so if you take, say, what a research department would do is they would be very much focused on raising the university's profile in terms of attracting, prestigious projects, for example, things like that. And then they also need to know what projects are going on in the university, and they need to measure the outputs of those projects. So that's really where the research information side comes into it. So you can measure the amount of publications and the amount of work that's been undertaken in the university. The ethics and the projects then came from sort of a compliance background. So particularly around ethics, and this is an area that we've found is really growing in Europe, but in Ireland in particular at the moment, which is to ensure that institutions are compliant with their ethical, or that, that the projects meet their ethical standards. And that has sort of taken our customer base away from universities per se and expanded them into what we'd call medical research centers. So the likes of teaching hospitals, things like that as well, would be very interested in those, in the ethics submission management side of the product.
That's a fascinating point about thought leadership. So do you think that that forms part of, I suppose, the organic development of any third level institution, that in order to be seen as leaders in their particular field, it helps to be seen as leaders in their infrastructure as well?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. What we would say, and this probably goes back to your poll, prior to this this webinar, is that in terms of their infrastructure, they're very interested in what the system can do, but they're not as interested in, sort of firing up more infrastructure internally and delivering it internally. So while our early sales would have been on-premise, as we would call them, a lot of that now has moved away, that they want a fully managed, or not fully managed, but software as a service solution, rather than something that they take in-house.
When we're looking at developing an offering, again, one that's so comprehensive, to what extent have you encountered any pushback, or have you experienced a learning curve where, certain departments might have come back and said, look, this is a part of the project or the product that we don't think we're going to need, or perhaps on the opposite end of the scale, can you have a look at this and see, can it fit into your offering?
Yeah, and we've had both. So where our system would interface with a number of systems internally and externally, but if we just say focus on the internal ones, the HR system, for example, would be one key internal system, and the finance system would be another key internal system that we would interface with. And we have had, I won't say pushback, but certainly the finance department like to keep finance, the management of the finance within their department and within the applications that they're currently using. So there is definitely an amount of work to do when we're engaging with the universities to ensure that we engage with the different departments, and one of the key ones would be the finance department. And then on the other part of your question around, will we bring in different functions into the system? So the timesheets, for example, would be a really good example of that, where we had our projects, so what we call Vidatum projects, and that manages the grants within the system. And then people would come up and say, that's very well, and we have these projects and we manage them up until they're live, but we do all of the funders need the returns, and one of the key parts of the returns is to ensure that the amount of time that people say they're working on the project is actually being worked on. So we initially enhanced the projects module to have some measurement of time, and that eventually grew into its own separate module, which we've delivered to universities in the UK on its own, without the rest of the system, which is the timesheets module, which has become increasingly important. So we've seen both sides of that.
So that works, I suppose, for funding bodies as well as universities then as well. So if you have a state-backed funder who are looking for that return, maybe not on investment, but certainly well, I guess return on their grants as opposed to, a spin out or something like that. Do you find universities are very enthusiastic about being able to show their funding bodies or their commercial partners basically that they're on the job, that they have been working?
We do, but also we found that they are looking to understand the returns on actually investing in the system as well. So, say earlier on in the sales process, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, it would have been enough to say that our system will help you manage this function, whereas that's not really enough for people anymore. They want to see the return on the investment in the system. So some of that is reduction in FTEs, as they call them, full-time equivalents, for the research function within the university. And while there's a central research function, there's also a distributed research function amongst schools and departments and what have you. And they want to see a reduction in those FTEs, and they also want to see they want us to try and quantify how the system improves the level of interaction with the funders, but also the increased success rate of funding. And so that they are looking to quantify that now before they invest in the software as well. So we've done a lot of work on that side of it.
Just on a commercial point there, you're also an Oracle partner. Can you explain the business value that has had for you in going to third level institutions?
Yeah, I mean, it's been really important to us. And, one of the things that has really changed over the last couple of years is, so we'd be, relative to the size of a university or an institution, we'd be very small, a small company relative to their size. So there's a perceived risk with them taking our system on, and being an Oracle certified partner has a really big impact on that in terms of they know they're buying into infrastructure which is, enterprise level, if you like. Another big area for us is around security. So when we were selling the system and it was on-premise, security, I mean, it was an issue. It was an issue with the application because it could be accessed outside the organization. But it wasn't as big an issue with, say, the infrastructure, where they would have had complete control over all of the parts of the system in terms of the database and the other different parts of the infrastructure. Now, while they don't want to have to do that internally, they want to be very, very sure that the system is secure. And so the Oracle documentation that we're able to provide them with all the different certifications that they have gives them a huge amount of comfort. And so that's really important in the sales cycle, but it's actually also really important in the contracts cycle as well, where we have to prove, what we've loosely agreed to deliver when we were doing the sales cycle. And then another area that's really, this is very specific to cloud. One of the areas that's really been very beneficial to us is the licensing has been addressed as part of our solution. So prior to, say, going to Oracle Cloud, we would have been in a situation where the licensing would have been something that we would either need to consider separately, so the Oracle database license, for example, or we would have to check to see whether their existing license would, cover our system and what have you. So that's been really, really useful. The last sort of intangible area I would sort of mention would be just the level of support that we've got from Oracle has been really good. So it is a cloud-based, and it has all the tools that you need, to run it from the web and what have you. But just in terms of, we still have access to all the other facilities that Oracle partners have, with contacts in Oracle in Ireland and what have you. So that's been really useful for us as well.
Thank you so much, Simon, for that fascinating insight into Vidatum and what you're doing at the moment. At this stage, Ian, I'd like to invite you back into the chat. And
Thanks, Noah.
while that is going on, I would just like to throw open our third poll, or our second poll, sorry, to our attendees. And our poll here is, in your opinion, what can be done to improve the cloud computing experience? Now, we have this listed as a multiple choice, but it may or may not be, depending on how this was set up by our producers. So feel free to tick all, many, none that apply. And we're just about at time up near there. And it looks like better cost structures and transparency seems to have won the day there. So I'd like to throw that point open to Simon and I suppose Ian to start with. How do you respond to that observation?
Yes, better cost structures. Well, how we've addressed it, we're quite transparent with our cloud pricing. If you go to cloud.oracle.com, you can see exactly what we charge. So whereas in the license business, it's a bit more opaque. It depends on the level of discount and so on. I suspect your viewers might be, or your listeners might be thinking about maybe what's return on investment, that type of cost and transparency, because I'm only guessing here that, you know, something might cost so much per month over 3 years. Where's my return on investment? Maybe that's what they mean. And that kind of ties into what I said in my slide deck. You know, we got 87% of people looking to use cloud in the next 3 years, but only 57% are reaping the benefits. So perhaps it resonates with that people just jump into cloud and not getting necessarily the value they want or should. And that comes, I think, from planning, right? You should talk to, for example, you could talk to my team. We're available as a kind of an add-on service. We don't charge. How we could optimize your workloads, and how, you know, if one of your KPIs is I need to get a return on investment for my workload, we'll work with you on that.
Yeah, Simon, do you have any observations or response to that?
Yeah, I alluded to that when I was answering some of your other questions. And so the return on investment, like when we price our system, it obviously includes all of the Oracle cloud costs. And so the when people are purchasing the system, they are seeing the entire cost of the application in terms of implementing it, but then also supporting and maintaining it over the lifetime of its use within the institution. And so we need to justify that, but we have found that they're more than happy to go with it. It's probably sort of harks back to Ian's sort of green field. We would generally be a green field when we're implemented in a university or an institution. And so what they would do is they would have a look at how much it would cost to run that system internally versus what we're looking to run it for them as software as a service. And we'd be very transparent with, this is how much this is how much the cloud hosting is costing. This is how much the support of the application is costing.
Yes, another finding from our survey that I'm not throwing up as a poll, but it's there in our statistics that people can follow at techcentral.ie and also techfire.techcentral.ie when this presentation goes live. It was found that half of our own survey respondents said they were considering solutions from other cloud providers. Now, we can take that either to mean running a multi-cloud environment or shopping around. So Ian, I'll start with you. Does this indicate a certain confidence in IT professionals that they are willing to consider much more complicated solutions than maybe they're using at the moment?
Well, I'd say it's not complicated. I'd say they want a simpler life, right? So if you go to our competition, or just pick Microsoft, they do collaboration and email better than anybody. So why wouldn't you give them their workload? And if you're running Oracle ERP on premise, we would be the best partner for that. So we're seeing it in even conversations with our customers. They are picking different vendors for the right workload. right? And so it may have different complexities, because you certainly do have to manage identity across multiple domains and securities and so on. But the upside, the benefits of that, you're able to extract a lot more value from your multi-cloud, from your vendors in a multi-cloud environment. So it's worth the effort, in my view.
Simon, have you anything to throw in on that?
Yeah, I would echo that. We have, so our solution is built on the Oracle Cloud, but we actually, just to go back to collaboration, some of the functions that we're implementing in the system are going to use SharePoint as a document collaboration. So, we're not going to reinvent the wheel. So we're going to manage that for our clients, which would be hooks into, say, SharePoint in Office 365. So yeah, it's definitely an upcoming feature of implementations.
Okay, I suppose I'd like to get into some meat and potatoes stuff at the moment and just revisit some of the stats from our survey. And in particular, I would be looking at the sort of things that people are actually moving to the cloud at the moment. So starting with customer-facing applications before moving down to enterprise applications like ERP, CRM. And then we have a slightly declining appetite when it comes to database, data warehouse, analytics, and then we have another category where things sort of fade out into insignificance. So Ian, just in terms of commenting on that, I suppose it's no surprise that people are going customer facing before looking at anything else.
Right. Well, we're in an e-business world, particularly now with COVID lockdown, right? So absolutely, it makes sense to have your web-facing infrastructure for customers, including chatbots and that type of infrastructure. On enterprise ERP, in my space, Oracle have two sides. We have the application side, so we do ERP Fusion, which is totally cloud, and then we have JD Edwards, which is on-prem. And we're finding a lot of customers who want to take that on-prem workload and put it into the cloud without changing. There's certainly demand from there, but as I alluded to in my presentation, ERP is a mission-critical workload. It's probably one of the last things to move because we can't meet the security requirements of an organization. And I put in performance, right? So if you have a slow system, it's still actually a security incident. So not just it has to meet the strict SLAs, if you like, of the business. So I can understand why that's a bit of a laggard. And then database, I'm surprised at analytics, because we don't even sell any on-prem analytics. It's all cloud, Oracle Analytics Cloud, and it's quite cheap, and we sell it per user. So maybe we're not doing a good enough job there. And you could even buy our analytics cloud and keep your on-prem database connected too. You don't actually have to buy a cloud database. So that's interesting. It means I have more work to do in that area to kind of get that message out.
Simon, I guess there's no surprises there for you either.
No. Ours doesn't probably fit as squarely into the workload types that are in that. I wouldn't necessarily say that it falls under other, but there are front-facing parts of the system. A lot of it is, I wouldn't call it, they're not our customers directly, but they are all the academics within the university. So they would have reasonably large sort of set of users that need a system that's easy to use. But then a lot of the value of the system is in the database, data warehousing elements of it. And so far, we have been able to convince the institutions that it is secure and they are willing to have the data on the cloud. So that's been good for us.
Yeah, and just to bring back those particular findings there, because I think it's a fairly interesting graph. Yeah, again, we're as Ian said, we are looking at analytics and business intelligence there, certainly at the lower end of things. Again, I suppose this speaks to a point about security and that sort of reticence to put things into the cloud. Simon, have you encountered that in particular?
Yes and no. Yes, in that people are extremely, they want very strong data protection agreements in place with us, but ultimately they do go with it in the cloud because the benefits of it outweigh the worries that they have. And we've done a lot of work over the last number of implementations to give people the level of comfort that they need, that what they have is secure. Now, most of what we store on the cloud is not highly sensitive, and a lot of it is actually meant to be public. But there are elements from, say, the finance system, excuse me, the finance system or the HR system, which would obviously be subject to GDPR regulations and what have you. But it hasn't, we've never had a client go, okay, you've not been able to convince us, so we're going to keep this on premise.
Yes, Ian, that eternal bogeyman of GDPR, are you finding discussions about that to be challenging?
Oh, yeah, we have a solution around that. So, I mean, just to preface that, I'm in Oracle 5.5 years. And since I joined, we now sell less security products than when I joined, but we're still ramping up on security. And the reason is we started giving our securities away included in our core services. So for example, if you have a database standard edition, a basic database in our cloud, we give you encryption included and give you your private key. So even we can't see the data. And that goes a long way to kind of addressing customers' needs. The last thing we want to do is have stumbling hurdles around security that stops us doing a deal with a customer. When we look at our Oracle Cloud infrastructure, we bought a company called ZenEdge, so we can take their WAF firewalls and include them into OCI. We bought Dyn.com, which were a global DNS provider and DDoS mitigation services. We included that in OCI. So security is hugely important for us. And there's the three pillars that we have to address for our customers, which is the confidentiality, the integrity and availability of information systems. Now, there's a lot we do ourselves, but it's still up to the customer. We're prepared to work with the customer to kind of meet any of their security concerns, including EU GDPR.
Yes, and I suppose I have one last slide to move on to, and I think this is sort of the $1 million question in a lot of respects. So which workloads people are definitely not moving to the cloud? And I suppose, sorry, we've actually addressed this before, but when we are looking at the likes of analytics, is this the new most sensitive part of businesses now, that people just aren't interested in sharing that sort of business critical information? I'll go to Ian for that.
Sure, not. I'm certainly not finding it. I mean, just on that slide, because I forgot about the reason why database won't move is when you look at a database now, a database never is sold or on its own, or not sold. It's never put in on its own. It's actually got connected to a fabric of other servers, middleware, and applications. So it's part of that. That's probably why the database goes, and that's typically your ERP. So that could be connected as well. So back to your question with analytics, I'm surprised with that because it's a good run rate product for us. It's inexpensive, and if we can't get a big deal with a customer, potentially say, hey, are you interested in analytics? You can get, I think 20 users for I think $20 per month. It's as cheap as that, right? So it's $400 per month for 20 users. It's quite inexpensive. So from a security perspective, you have two options. You can keep your data on your on-premise database, right? It's secure there because you've got your own security. Or you could get a database off us, which we give you security included in the price because we don't want to have that conversation. So I'm surprised by that. And it just means we've more work to advertise to our customers that your data is secure if you give it to us.
Absolutely. And Simon, I suppose to pluck another point out of that, looking at security in general, are there still the concerns that people come to you and say, look, this is a great offering, but look, I'm concerned about downtime. I'm concerned about somebody else being able to get in and access my data. Is that still happening?
Oh, very much so. Yeah, huge. So if you address the downtime, we provide options to clients because it's tiered in, the Oracle OCI has tiered options, meaning if they want 24/7, and they are happy to pay for additional services such as, the Oracle disaster recovery and, the always like rack and things like that. Those options are there. So it's not just you can have this and we can only offer X percentage of uptime. If you absolutely need more, there is a 24/7 option available, even across multiple data centers and things like that. In terms of security, we've had to address that. And on the infrastructure side, a lot of the documentation and, like Ian was saying, a lot of the stuff that's actually bundled now with the database and the other parts of the infrastructure cover out of the box mostly what our clients are looking for. But then we have the application side as well. So we've had to engage with third-party services to certify our application at for attacks through the application itself, not just the back end. So we've got to sort of keep an eye on both sides of things. But I would say that it's largely covered, from the Oracle side, from what we're looking for, and what our clients are looking for. There's configuration, and we have our internal configuration documents and what have you, but the tools are there, and it's not a very big step for us to take to start up, say, an instant on the Oracle OCI and have it secure very, very quickly. It's not an issue. And then all the documentation that Oracle provides for us, for our clients, gives them the level of comfort that it's, that the security is there on the infrastructure side. So that has been enough, even for very large organizations. They've been happy to go with that solution.
Right, Simon and Ian, thanks so much for your time this morning. I think that's been a fascinating session, and I hope our audience got an awful lot out of it. I know I did. Now on to a nice bit of business for ourselves. We would like to draw the winner of this week's Apple Watch Prize, and I'm happy to say that our production staff have come up with Joe Hanley from the Department of Agriculture. We will be in touch. And congratulations on your win. As for everyone else, thank you for showing up this morning. If you wish to rewatch this event, of course, you will be able to do so on techfire.ie. And the research that we referenced at length here will be available with comment on techcentral.ie very soon. So thank you all for your time and have a great day.